we're having all of our senior leadership, so our vice presidents and above, each one of them is actually spending several consecutive days working in the store side by side with our store team leaders, so they can have a better understanding of like how a store operates day to day, how their work impacts the lives of our team members and our customers.
Jason Buechel, the CEO of Whole Foods, took over from co-founder John Mackey in 2022. His first plan of action, a countrywide conversation tour, asking team members to share their feedback. His biggest takeaway, he says, was, quote, to make sure we continue to be store-centric, meaning build relationships with local employees, make sure local employees are building their own relationships with local suppliers and customers, and then make sure all of that insight flows to the people at the top. Local decisions can then fuel global strategies. Here's how Jason Buechel keeps Whole Foods grounded in its community roots. A big part of how you manage, my understanding, is by going to stores. So can you talk a little bit about your philosophy on being on the road or how you do that?
Yeah, and so I would say there's a hybrid approach. I can't do all of my responsibilities necessarily in a store, but one of the tenets within our long-term vision, growing with purpose, is store centricity. And why I felt this was so important, especially as we worked through the pandemic, making sure that all of our team members have an understanding of what's happening in our stores. What is our customer experience like? What is our team member experience like? How are our suppliers working with our stores? And how are things happening upstream from there? Even, our online business is still really heavily centered around our store because it's the place where we are picking our customers' orders. And so this was something that I felt, regardless of myself or any other store support team member, it's so important to understand the work that we do, understanding how it trickles down into our stores. And understanding that impact, whether it's our customer experience or our team member experience, what we can do to continue to make that better. So one of the things that we did last year after we rolled out our new vision was a roadshow. And this roadshow involved every single one of our stores, facilities, and offices being visited either by myself or another member of our executive team. So we're having all of our senior leadership, so our vice presidents and above within the company all have assigned stores that they're visiting. And even for our vice presidents, each one of them is actually spending several consecutive days working in the store side by side with our store team leaders, so they can have a better understanding of like how a store operates day to day, have a better understanding of how their work impacts the lives of our team members and our customers. And part of their responsibility is taking those experiences back to their team and sharing those out. And so my hope is through a lot of this work, not only are we becoming a more efficient company, but we're actually serving our customers better. We have a better understanding of how we can simplify things for our team member and create a better team member experience. And so a big part for me is leading by example. And that's why I spend as much time as I do in our stores on the road.
Are there examples of things you've learned in those store visits that are now rolled out?
Tons of examples. How we discontinue products in the store and notifying our team members and the information we give them. Nothing's more frustrating for a customer when the product that they've been coming into the store is no longer on the shelves. And at the same time, our team members not having any information to share about that, or what is an alternative that this customer could then be able to purchase from us.
And
instead.
Before this, you would have assumed we can just take something off the shelf and we move on to something else.
Exactly. Or, and we had some challenges before where we were doing a lot of things really, really fast, and it wasn't necessarily working really easy for our stores to execute. And so in some cases, we might be doing a reset. Some of this went to upstream problems with some of our suppliers and distributors where we couldn't do the entire reset at once. Well, the last thing that you want to have when you're doing this is taking products off the shelf and having holes, having products where it looks like something might be out of stock. And so we got some really tangible feedback. One of the other big things for us is we've got a lot of stores where they're in more remote locations. We call them frontier stores. And so they usually don't have another store that's right around them. And so their needs are really different than a set of stores here in Manhattan that are close by. And we learned from a lot of feedback from our team members through customers, and it let us go do some experiments that have been highly successful in bringing more customers in the store and having more engagement. We made some adjustments to what we actually serve in our hot bars, as an example. We learned about some programs where we can tie deeper into the community. I think the other part that you have with some of these frontier stores is, our brand is not as prevalent. We only have one store in a market where, a competitor might have 10 or 15 or what have you, versus in New York here, you've got so many stores, like everybody knows who Whole Foods is. So some of the work that we need to do is we have to extend further. The other thing that we, sometimes have is, not as plentiful of the local assortment. So when you think about, when folks on our merchant teams are working through things, they're trying to figure out, like, how do we solve for the biggest metros as possible? Well, in some cases, these stores don't necessarily get the same attention. So how do we give them some of the autonomy so we can make sure if there's a local coffee or item that we should be carrying that the community really wants, how do we make sure that those mechanisms are in place? So just little things like that we can massage and ultimately make sure that we're thinking about, from the customer and the team member experience, how do we best connect those?
So you've talked a lot, either directly about culture or sort of indirectly about the culture. How do you ensure you're part of Amazon? How do you make sure that you have your own culture within this much larger, behemoth?
One thing that I look at culture is it has to be ever evolving. Just like our business is dynamically changing. How we have to serve customers week to week, month to month, quarter to quarter, year to year, it changes. And the culture does as well. The important part is you have to figure out, what are the tenets that need to remain constant, and what are the things that are most important that can allow the company to be successful through the culture that we've created. And one of the things that John Mackey, our former CEO and founder, put into place is something called a Culture Champions program. And so we deliberately spent time right after getting acquired by Amazon and said, how can we look at the parts of the culture that are really important, that we want to maintain? What are some of the things that we have to evolve on? And let's study Amazon's culture and say, like, what are some of the things that we can learn immediately and start and put into place? And this has been an ever-evolving process. And so I would describe our culture now as it's something that is right for where we're at right now. And it's made us a better company. And it's sort of a hybrid of what the Whole Foods culture was at the acquisition time, and heavily influenced with what we feel are the very best parts of the Amazon culture. We adopted, leadership principles that were highly inspired by Amazon's. They're not identical, but they're very close, and they help, connect to what is unique and important about Whole Foods. And what our Culture Champions program has done, and this is something where, across our 100,000 team members, 25,000 have spent time being certified as a culture champion. It's a training course, a certification that you actually have to spend time on. And so by having team members who actually go through this process, and every store having what we call a culture champion ambassador, sort of a leader of this group, we can help promote and make sure that the parts of our culture that are important are lasting. And as we have to evolve things, we use this group as well to help solicit ideas, help understand, like, where we have engagement opportunities or, challenges that we might have in particular stores. And so it becomes almost a problem-solving group as well.
But what about internally? I mean, it's one thing to try to keep your culture with your customers, but when you're part of a massive organization and you're your own brand and your own culture, is there a sort of internal version of these culture champions who teaches Amazon, like, hey, this is why it's important that Whole Foods have its own culture, or this is how we do things this way, and trust us, you want us to keep doing things this way? I think it's a question that when businesses sell to large companies, I think it's kind of a fear that a lot of founders have, is we're going to get swallowed up and we have our own culture. So is there anything that you've learned or anything that you would tell people about how to make sure that you do keep this culture?
I think there's a couple things. The first piece of advice that I would give is, don't look at culture as being a stagnant thing. So first is having flexibility and be open to say, is what I'm defining as culture, is everything here important and critical, and is it the best for the organization to go forward? Because we had to do some pruning and grooming and saying, like, some of these areas maybe we want to do a little bit differently. And then be open to say, like, what are things that we want to adopt into our culture as well? that can actually make us better as an organization. So I think that's the first step I would give. And then as it relates to sort of protecting those things that are important, figure out how you can clearly articulate those, memorialize those, and get alignment. And that's one of the things that we did even with, building our own leadership principles. I'll give an example of something that's really important in Whole Foods Market, and it's, our win-win supplier partnerships. And quite frankly, just win-win solutioning. So always looking at our stakeholder base and saying, as we have to solve a problem or make a decision, how do we think about all of our different stakeholders, from customers to team members, to community members, to suppliers, to the environment? And for us, that's been a long-standing tradition. So being really clear that as we make decisions, this is a way that we're going to work. And so then we have a common understanding of this is a way of working. And I think sharing that out, one, is one of the ways that you can help adopt and spread some of the best practices, but you're helping set expectations of this is something that's really critically important to us and our organization.
I'd love to end these with career advice. What kind of career advice do you give someone who is new at Whole Foods? They want to climb the ladder, they want to make a career out of it. What do you tell people when they first start?
Be a sponge and be flexible. And by be a sponge, learn from all around. Don't just look at these are the responsibilities I need to do and go and execute them. Learn the reasoning, behind the why. Learn things that may not be part of your job today, but could be part of your job tomorrow. Learn from peers, learn from team members in different departments, and be flexible. When there's a challenging day going on in the store and another team needs help, be flexible to be able to go and support that. And so being a sponge is going to help you not just help yourself, but ultimately, you then pay it forward doing the same thing as other folks come for advice and just being flexible. Like a lot of folks see, moving to the next job or it's got to be this like perfect line. And the reality is that's not how a lot of careers happen. And I can say even for mine, I never would have guessed after graduating college or, even my first 10 years into working out, ever would have ever been in this role. Even when I joined Whole Foods Market, I never imagined I would have stepped into the CEO position. And so being flexible and ultimately making sure you're learning from your surroundings, I think is some of the best advice I could give.
Here's what stood out to me. Jason has crafted a feedback loop at Whole Foods that corporations dream of. The key sounds simple, but it's actually a huge feat: personal relationships. Jason's job and the job of his leadership team is not just to give orders, but to listen. They foster an environment where local employees feel comfortable sharing what works and what doesn't, and then taking that feedback to adapt locally and to reevaluate company strategy. It's up to everyone at the company, from the bottom up, to cultivate these kind of relationships with customers and even suppliers. Making a better business doesn't just happen in the C-suite. If you invest in having leaders on the ground and having them work alongside employees, you can truly see what's working. Frontline employees have valuable insights, and it's important to tap into their intelligence to make the company better. Now I'd like to hear from you. How do you make sure you have your ear to the ground? Let me know in the comments.